Talk away.
So cheers.
Santé.
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 What does santé mean?
Santé is the conjugation of the verb santier, which means for your health, to your health.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so santé is the conjugation of that.
Okay. Well, welcome back, everybody. This is That's What He Said, which we are a podcast about dating. And today we're here with Matt Stanley. Is that what you go by?
Matt. Mm-hmm.
Matt. Okay. So we had previously, several episodes back, the Stanleys on, which was John and Sarah Stanley. And so you'll notice a similar background. We're here with John Stanley's older brother, Matt. And you're how much older than him?
We're actually 16 months apart.
Okay.
16 months apart, so it's not too far apart. I think they call it, it's not quite Irish twins, but we're close enough.
Is that on purpose, you know?
You know, that's a question for my mother and father, you know, but it was great. We're close in age, so the sibling rivalry was always pretty intense, even from an early age.
So before we get into our topic question for today is, what is wrong with American men? Okay, I'll explain in a moment why Matt is here for our topic, because he is definitely an American man, so it'll be an interesting perspective. But first we'll do a little icebreaker, which is would you rather. Have you ever played that game?
I have.
Okay. So you have to answer honestly.
Okay.
Okay. Would you rather dance every time you hear music or sing along every time you hear a song?
Sing along.
You're not a good dancer, are you?
Well, I mean, comparatively speaking, like to my sister-in-law, I mean, not even close. I love dancing, but I'd probably prefer to sing. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I can sing, but who knows?
Who knows? I guess we'll find out.
The jury's out.
Okay. Would you rather wake up naked in a forest 5 miles from home or in your underwear at work?
Underwear at work.
In front of everybody?
Yeah. I mean, I worked in Alzheimer's care for the longest time. That was my company, and so
it might look kind of normal then.
It would be very normal. Yeah.
Just another day.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you rather accidentally like an old photo of your ex on Instagram or accidentally send a sext to your mom?
Probably for sure like an old picture.
Like an old picture, yeah, for sure. Would you rather have everyone you know be able to read your thoughts or everyone you know have access to your internet history?
Read my thoughts for sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, why?
Because then that makes explaining myself so much easier.
I guess if you're really direct, that makes sense.
Yeah.
There's nothing to hide.
It saves me time from talking.
Okay. Yeah, I would definitely pick internet history. I would not want people to read my thoughts.
Oh, my history's boring anyways.
Okay. Would you rather wear a wedding tuxedo every single day or a bathing suit every single day?
Tuxedo.
I would definitely pick bathing suit, assuming that it's hot.
Yeah. Tuxedo. It's a great formal piece.
Yeah. But you'd be stuck in it.
That's okay.
This doesn't bother you?
No. Not at all. Just undo that top button, loosen it up a little bit, you're good to go.
Okay.
Oh.
What about, would you rather wear a bib every time you eat out or drink from a sippy cup every time you're at a bar?
Oh, either or would be fine with me. But I'm getting older, so probably a bib. Just to kind of catch all the remnants.
It might actually be convenient.
Yes, probably more useful.
Would you rather sing your favorite song in front of a sold-out arena crowd or in front of the original artist alone?
I could go either way on that.
You would sing in an arena?
Oh, yeah.
We're going to have to hear you sing because you're pretty confident.
It's risk reward.
You had to pick.
Risk
Who's
reward.
Your favorite artist?
Oh, right now or just in general?
In general. Like overall favorite.
Man, been a big fan of Mark Broussard for a long time.
I don't think I know who that is.
Yeah, he's kind of that New Orleans, blues, jazz, kind of mixed with Johnny Lang's soul a little bit. So lots of emotion. I have sang in front of him.
You have?
Yeah.
Tell that story.
Oh my gosh. So when I used to raise money for Alzheimer's through my company and for events to help them fund like scholarships. And so I would put on a concert every year. So I've worked with tons of musicians, and certainly having a musician as a brother, you learn to kind of kill those nerves pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so I hired Mark to do, he's done 5 of my shows. And so he and I actually have become pretty good friends. And so I'll go into the green room before the shows, and I'll play and sing with him. It doesn't bother me.
Were you a fan of his before you became friends?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
10, 13 years before I met him, I loved his music coming out of college. Super nice guy. The guy's one of the best singers I've ever heard.
And you're how old?
44.
Okay. So college was a while back. Where'd you go to college?
College was almost 20 years ago. I went to Baylor.
Okay. So on that note, introduce yourself and tell us more about you, your businesses, what you do, hobbies.
Very much a serial entrepreneur. So I started a company about 15 years ago called Sundance Memory Care. We build and fund and operate standalone memory care communities across Texas. I just sold my last one back in September. I've got a staffing company. I started a magazine 2 years ago, so getting ready to release issue 5. Shot my first documentary in Paris almost all the year last year, so that's coming out here probably the next month and a half.
So, and that's the Cultivate.
That's Cultivate.
That's that associated with the magazine?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that people subscribe to, or how do they see it?
No, to be honest, Cultivate started during COVID. Being in healthcare, very hands-on CEO. You know, I was in the building 15 to 24 hours a day, depending on the week and depending on the schedule. So those creative juices kind of die off a little bit. And so I was like, how do I provide content to people who are stuck and tired of watching Netflix? They can't go see music, they can't go see shows, they can't go shop. So how do I provide something to them that stimulates or cultivates the brain, but is also something that you can hold in your hand? You know, it's not virtual, it's not online, it's something you can actually hold, you can put on your coffee table.
So it's a physical magazine.
Oh yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And so
I feel like nobody gets those anymore, but I'm subscribed to Vogue and Architectural Digest.
Yeah.
Like they're just all over my house.
Yeah. So it was kind of more of a mindset of really built towards educating men. Does that make sense? Cultivating growth in men. So anywhere from how do you style this? You know, what are some date ideas when things finally do open up? What can I learn about that's not related to ESPN or that's not related to, you know, my job? Something that would be beneficial in a relationship, but beneficial to my overall well-being at the same time. And so it was a lot of style, a lot of fashion. I worked with Austin Wine Merchant. I worked with wine experts to kind of say, hey, if you like this, try this. If you like a Cab Sauv, try this Cab Franc. If you like this Chardonnay, try a Grand Cru Riesling. If you like this, try this. And then I wanted to have the music and art piece. So I worked with a bunch of underground artists in Austin who did some really cool underground shows during COVID to kind of highlight their work, kind of get them into a different space. And then I worked with musicians, and one of them was actually Mark Broussard. And so obviously he couldn't tour. So what we did was we actually rented out a bowling alley in Louisiana, in Lafayette, where he's from. Got his full band, spaced them all out, and we shot a 60-minute show. We did a Facebook Live after it was recorded and edited for the magazine. So like when you buy the magazine, you get the free hour show.
Oh, cool.
So then you had the Facebook Live. So if you couldn't go to a show, we created the show for you. And we did interviews with him. Ernie Halter, you know, writes for Justin Bieber and Selena and Alan Stone and all those guys. So really, really cool. Cool little thing. And it's kind of just turned into its own thing.
Just kind of
and
like branching off into different
I've made it
or categories.
Absolutely. I've let it be super organic, meaning that it just kind of cultivates and takes a life of its own, like a seed planted. It just it's going to grow into the sunlight however it wants to grow, and if it dies, it dies. But really excited. I've met some really cool people. Met some amazing,
sounds like more
amazing
like a
stuff.
passion project.
For sure. Just kind of get those creative juices flowing. I really only wanted to do one issue, and you know, it's not my full-time work, but it's fun work.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a dating podcast. So tell us briefly, kind of for the context that you're going to be speaking through, what is your dating history?
I was married long ago, almost 15, 16 years ago. And then, you date on and off. My job was 24/7. I was on call 24/7, so that makes dating incredibly difficult, especially if it's your company.
Was that?
My company?
The 24/7.
Oh, well, Sundance we operated 24/7 for 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I had some amazing relationships, had some ones that weren't so good, and that's just kind of where you end up. But you're going to give up something for another thing. And so COVID hit, social life kind of takes a stall because you've got residents and people you have to make sure aren't dying and take care of them, so that can wreak havoc on some things. But yeah, I don't really have any complaints about my dating history. Good moments, bad moments. C'est la vie.
What's your goal now? What are you looking for now?
In what? Life?
In relationships.
In relationships, what am I looking for?
In dating and romantic relationships.
Just peace. Easy peace and understanding.
Okay. Yeah. Are you looking to get married?
I don't know. I ask myself that question from time to time. Today, no. Tomorrow that may change. But I'm really in a good spot. I'm really content right now.
How are you going to decide that? Just if you meet the right person?
Yeah, easy. Yeah, if the right person shows up and there's good clicking and it kind of meets all the values and mindsets and principles I have, then it is. If it's not, it's not.
Okay. And so any strong feelings about having kids or not in the future, having a family?
No, I knew when I signed up for Sundance to start that company that I would be giving up certain things. And so not opposed to kids, but if I don't have kids, it doesn't bother me either.
But you're not doing that anymore, right?
Not anymore. So okay. No, but I still run 3 or 4 other companies. So it's still a lot of work.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like your work is kind of your main passion in life, and dating or relationships, family might be secondary. Is that right?
It really just depends on the season. Okay. It really just depends on the season. I think part of my life that is the entrepreneur life. It's if you're really doing entrepreneurship and you see this stuff on Instagram, you see really good entrepreneurs, you see really bad entrepreneurs, and I heard Gary Vee say this one time. He's like, just because I put it in my profile doesn't mean that I'm that.
Right.
But being in healthcare, a lot of my time goes there, and so it's by the nature of the industry, I've had to commit a lot of time to work, but it's impacted really a lot of people in some good ways.
Yeah.
And so going into it, I may be giving up friendships, I'm giving up happy hours, I'm giving up social life, I'm giving up personal relationships, I'm giving up family time.
Sure.
But that's kind of, I think you have to be called into that, and if you are called into that, I think you have to be obedient to that, and the blessings out of that will eventually come. So waiting, there's a blessing in the waiting. So that could be a wife, that could be kids, that could just be me and a dog and pony just cruising around the yard. Yeah.
Do you have a dog and pony?
No, we've got some horses up in Anna. We're building out some more of the farm and ranch down in East Texas, and we'll probably bring 3 or 4 horses down into the year.
And that's, when you say we, that's you and your family.
That's the family.
Yeah,
it's kind of part of the family business. Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, as far as the future, no expectations.
Okay.
No expectations.
No expectations, no firm plan or anything.
No, just live.
Okay.
Yeah.
So getting into our topic, give us the background on how you came to have the strong feelings that you do about American culture versus other cultures. How did this come about?
Just travel.
You're born and raised in Texas?
Oh yeah, born and raised in Texas.
Okay.
So my mother was orphaned when she was 9. Mm-hmm. Her entire family was killed in a car wreck. She was the only one to survive. Basically raised herself, amazing woman. But she was always very adamant about John and I trying a whole bunch of stuff, playing instruments, playing different sports, trying out different languages, She wanted us to play 1,000 different instruments, but one thing she always encouraged us to do was travel. And that's kind of, that's kind of what I did. And so when you travel, you begin to see the world through your lens, but you also begin to see the world as it is.
Yeah.
And so in that, is this getting back to your question about America?
Yeah, yes, we're just barely getting into it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So where have you traveled to?
Oh, I've traveled all over. I think we talked about Japan.
Yeah.
I played soccer in Japan when I was in middle school.
Oh, that's cool.
So I've been all over Europe. I've been to Central America. I've been to, our great neighbor up north, Canada, all over Canada. I've been all throughout the U.S., but primarily a lot through Europe, Scandinavian countries, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, the Netherlands, a bunch of places like that, the U.K., Europe. I've actually never been to South America. Okay. It's just kind of not my jam, I don't think.
But you've never been?
Yeah, I know, but I have friends who go who are also well-traveled, and they're like, it's not your vibe, Stanley.
It's not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where's your favorite place?
Paris.
Paris. Why?
Paris to me is the blood that essentially beats my heart. So everything about that city just vibes with me.
Okay.
Great art culture, great music culture, great culinary culture. We talked about the gastronomy, in France, and so many things that you see in the States, come out of France. Butter. I mean, who doesn't like butter? And so.
I mean, they'll tell you it's not good for you, but I eat lots of butter.
French butter is really great for you. So It's just, there is a culture there that is very much into living, also very much into, intellectual exploration of ancillary things that we may find, quite boring, but to me are quite stimulating.
Like such as?
I mean, a lot of Americans, at least to me, aren't going to sit there and sit for 4.5 hours, 5 hours at dinner and watch a chef do what he does. Mm-hmm. To me, that's almost a modern renaissance. You're seeing these artists paint their tapestry as a plate, their paint and paintbrush as a knife and fork, and the produce and the meat that they're using. And so when you see a true chef create something from this one or two different types of produce, it's pretty incredible. Mm-hmm. It's pretty incredible. So for me, I love that, but it's not always appreciated.
Sure.
It's referenced as bougie, but that's just kind of my jam. There's.
I think it's cool. I've done the when they do, the chef does the sushi in front of you. It's a word for it of like, where it's the same exact thing you're describing, but it's just Japanese. It's
I'm not sure.
I'll think of the word. I think it starts with a K.
Yeah, but I think the biggest thing I love about Paris is the history. There's so much history in Europe. There's so much stuff that has come through Paris.
Yeah.
And you see it referenced all the way back into biblical times, all the way into the Olympics that are coming this summer.
Omakase.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
That's what it's called.
Yeah, so much history through Europe, so much history and lessons and culture. It's a beautiful thing. It fills my cup.
Richness.
Oh, for sure. There's a richness to the civilization. There's a richness to the society, and there is definitely. It's just hard to explain until you get there. I always tell folks, if you've never been to Paris, you need to go, because it's just something about it. They have all these laws and regulations about what you can build inside the city, what you can't build in the city. So it kind of keeps that historic and cultural development feel. Mm-hmm. It's just beautiful.
So what about the people? Because I'll say the stereotype is that Parisians are really rude. So what is that true, or?
Well, the question I would ask for you is, who created that notion, or what makes that a popular opinion?
I don't know, just a general stereotype. I think that they're.
But where did that come from?
I couldn't tell you. Just a society, just like any other stereotype. I mean, like that in Texas, everybody rides horses.
I ride horses.
Well, there's some truth to all stereotypes.
So I think in Paris, there's so much debate on this topic, and I talk to my French friends all the time.
Mm-hmm. Are your French friends Parisian?
Most of them are Parisian.
Okay.
Yeah, I have some that live in the country, like in Amboise and Tours and things like that. But Parisians are very intentional. Does that make sense? They're very specific, and so there is an elegance and a class that I love. And if you're not used to that, there's a formality to how they live. And so when you operate out of that cultural norm, how they respond back can be perceived as rude because it's not our cultural norm. Okay. So for example, you would never walk into a mall. Never walk into a mall and walk past the door guy and not say bonjour, bonsoir, ça va. It is mandatory in their culture to be polite. Mm-hmm. And so and they're very polite in a formal way. So it's bonjour, bonsoir, all these things, a bonne journée. Like you can go, I went to get my my MacBook fixed in Paris, and they're so polite. They're asking please and thank you. You're welcome. Have a great day. We're so good to see you.
The people working there.
Happy here to see you. And so they want you to extend that courtesy back to them. When you don't, then they just kind of shut off. And so, but if you don't understand the culture, if you don't understand how they approach that, then I can see how some people would say that that's a very rude culture, because they will shut you down because they don't want to be disrespected. Yeah. They want to respect you, but they don't want to be disrespected, which I think is a wonderful thing. Hello, how are you? Great to see you. Have a good evening. Happy to help you. Thank you.
Do you feel like that's something that Americans don't do?
It just depends. I think in the South it's very different. In the South, I think we're pretty welcoming and pretty hospitable, kind of that good old Southern hospitality. Not so much on the West Coast. Midwest, probably still for sure. I've got some good Nebraska and Kansas friends who are, they're very respectful. It just really depends. East Coast is a little bit more gritty, and they're kind of in your face. And, Italians are kind of like that, in my opinion, which I still love. But the French, it's a very soft-spoken politeness. And if you're not used to that, it's a different ballgame.
What about like people say, like they won't talk to you unless you speak French?
Well, I think that, again, this kind of goes back to their culture, how you pronounce words, because they want to communicate with you, but they also don't want to waste your time and waste our time. Because Paris, everybody is like the #1 city everyone goes to. English? Almost everyone, almost all of my Parisian friends speak three or four languages.
Because I feel like the message is that if you're an American tourist in Paris and you're asking for help or directions, if you're not able to ask in French, then no one's going to help you unless they're not French.
I think there's two sides to that. I think yes and no. Okay. So they want you to make an attempt. They don't want you to speak French because they know that you're American. They understand American school systems, or you're probably learning Spanish more than you're learning French, and you're probably just learning Spanish so you can get a B or an A, so you can, no pass, no play, and you can make sure you're playing varsity on Friday night.
Yeah.
Right? So that is a different mindset than what you're going to see in French culture. They want you to at least attempt.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
What if you make a bad attempt?
I have seen some of my friends make really bad attempts, and they're like, these are the nicest people in the world. It's just more about the attempt. They want you to try. They want you to explore the culture. They want you to be brave. They want you to take a risk. This has been the epicenter of so much art and history and kings and kingdoms for centuries. For centuries. I mean, 5 times, 6 times longer than the States has been around. And so I personally think in all of my travels, Parisians are some of the nicest people in the world.
Okay.
I would go against that grain.
Really?
Yes. Now, I took French in high school. My French is pretty decent.
Okay.
But they are so nice to me. They're just so nice.
It seems like you have really had sort of a growth or shift or change from your travels, and specifically to France. I mean, you're an American, born and raised in Texas, but you obviously have this perspective that most people like that don't have, most men like that don't have.
Probably.
So describe that change or growth. How did that happen, and what was it like?
Be more specific.
What were you like before you went to France, and what were you like after you went to France?
Sure. So before I went to France, I had a hard work ethic instilled in me from a very young age. And so for me, it was just getting my career off the ground. Before, it was more of this is a place I'm going to get to. When I first went, I came back of, this is a place I have to stay.
Okay.
Does that make sense? And so before, it was very much an ambition. I think after, it was probably more of a continual life goal to how long can I stay there.
So then why are you here?
Visa, just immigration laws.
Okay. Is your plan to ultimately move there?
I think the goal is to be there half the year and to be here half the year.
So the reason I have this topic is I think the reason we have the podcast is because there is a huge problem, or many problems within the American dating culture specifically going on. Men, in my opinion, are the foundation of a society, should be. And so I'm curious from your point of view, what is the difference between American men and the men in Europe or France or that you have seen culturally? And what do you think is the reason for the issues that we're having that other people aren't having when it comes to dating?
That's a loaded question. I'll paint.
You can unload.
I'll paint with broad strokes. I think, speaking generally, 30,000-foot view, I think many American men who aren't well-traveled have a narrow scope of how they view life and culture.
Okay.
A lot of that is the size of the country. You know, Texas and France are about the same size. So, like, for us to go from Texas to Oklahoma, that's a pretty long drive. That's probably still a 3 or 4 hour flight.
Right.
Probably 2 hour flight.
It's about an hour and a half.
Yeah, but a 2 hour flight from Paris, I can be in Copenhagen. I can be in Barcelona. I can be in Florence. You know, I can be in Prague. All those different places within 2 hours. Well, our choices are like Oklahoma, New Mexico, Louisiana, things like that. And so there's a grandiosity to the States that is, you have to kind of get your mind around.
Right.
But in that, having access to so many different cultures and foods and art and history of Europe versus that of American history, I think European men have a much broader and wider perspective of life, the world, and what different type of men do around the world. So there's more of this collaborative effort of what being a man looks like. Where in the States, it's typically, from what I see, divided politically. It's divided on, this is how you were raised. It's very much pragmatics. And there's more of a didactic, you know, worldview in Europe. And so when you have a greater worldview, and you still understand your principles and your values and your mindset, you have all this data to draw from. Where in the States, that scope is so narrow.
To draw from, to become who you are, to build your character.
To build your character, to build your mindset, to develop your principles, to develop your absolutes, absolutely.
So, with that being said, does that imply that Americans or American men are kind of shallow?
I don't think it implies that they're shallow. I wouldn't say that American men are shallow. I have some really great friends here. I mean, I have a great brother.
Yes.
You know, he's not as well traveled as I am, but I mean, that guy's a stud. You know, I trust my brother implicitly. He's a great husband.
He's
a great brother. He's a great brother, phenomenal father. He's an incredible son that honors his mother and father. And so I don't want to take away from that. But I think if you sat a European man down, if you sat a Parisian and a Houstonian together, I think the differences would be glaring. I think you would notice a difference instantly. Well, let me ask you this question. What are your conversations with men? What do they revolve around?
I'll speak generally for most women, not for myself.
I'm asking for you.
For me?
Yeah. What do they revolve around?
I think you could say sports for most men, not all. Or whatever hobbies they have. So maybe like music or whatever they're into.
Those are great examples.
Fun things.
What made you say
Politics.
Sports first?
That's a huge stereotype. I mean, most men are very.
I would actually agree with you.
Yeah.
I would actually agree with it. American culture revolves around sports.
It's very known for sports.
Very known for sports. And so I think that's one of the glaring differences you're going to see. And this may not be part of the question, but I'm kind of, you know, diverging into this sector. You're typically not going to see sports come out of a European's mouth first, unless they're just a raging lunatic who loves soccer all the time. I mean, like my photography friends in Paris who work on the magazine with me, you know, they're doing street photography. They're working with artists. They're shooting for Gucci. They're shooting for fashion. So all these magazines that you're subscribed to, you're seeing all their pictures. So they're so engrossed in their work. You know, my friend Anya.
Creativity, maybe.
Definitely more creativity than more of this standardized, this is what it has to be. Go to school, get good grades, go to college, climb the corporate ladder. It's a very different culture over there.
Yeah.
You know, they will always say, you guys live to work, we work to live. And that's kind of a cliche statement, but there's a lot of truth in that at the same time. You know, it is not uncommon to go to a cafe in Paris at 10 o'clock in the morning and you see two old men, you know, reading the paper, eating pain au chocolat, you know, with, you know, a bottle of wine open, and they will sit there for 2 hours. Then they'll go have lunch. And then they may go to work. They may come back. You know, they're going to go see music. They're going to go hang out with their wives. And when I say hang out and engage, like there's no phones. It is right here, you and me the whole time. And so they're living really in that moment where I feel like Americans are trying everything they can to create those moments instead of living in them.
Sure, yeah.
And so it's not, you're not going to see big match day parties. You probably will in the UK. I think the UK is probably very similar to American culture, very much like Australia is, but Europeans, it's going to be more intellect, cultural, history, music, that creative piece.
Okay, so I'm going to describe like your typical, most of the audience is like a millennial age, so I think now that's like 30 to like late 40s.
Not late 40s.
Are you a millennial? You're not?
I'm Gen
you're
X.
Off the cutoff?
I am the exact year of the cutoff. I'm
okay.
Gen X. John's a millennial.
Well, we'll include you. You can.
Don't include me in that category.
So most of those like single guys, like what the vast majority that you're going to see nowadays.
In America?
In America. Like you said, climb the corporate ladder or whatever profession they're in. They probably have a decent job. Living alone. Their free time is typically filled with like socializing, so going to bars, going out to eat. If you're lucky, they might be someone who works out. They're going to probably sleep around. When it comes to marriage or commitment, they're like, nah, like not motivated to date with intention.
Sure.
And that's kind of it. It's kind of like that, just on repeat every week. You know, living for Friday afternoon kind of thing. And those fun times where they're socializing and whatnot is not filled with art or creativity or deep conversation. Most of the time it is going to be filled with just kind of shallow interactions and partying and things like that. So with that sort of picture in your mind of the average
millennial,
single American millennial, how does that compare to if you take that same group of people in a place like France? So same age range, same type of men.
How does it compare? So I think you're gonna have segments of that anywhere you go. I think in the world, because that's just people. People are people are people are people.
Sure.
The difference I see, at least with my generation in Paris, is again from a cultural perspective, it's that live to work, work to live dichotomy. So in Paris with millennials, you're going to see them going to concerts, you're going to see them going to shows. I mean, I'm sure they still love to party a little bit, but it's in a very different way. They're not living for that. Does that make sense? It's like, we're going to live in the moment. If that's what the moment is right now, then we're going to sit in that moment. And there's obviously, you know, big artists and big shows, but, you know, what you're not going to see is you're not going to see this, you know, fantasy of a world they're creating in their mind to go and live. Does that make sense? It's not going to revolve around sports. It's not going to revolve around getting to Friday. Friday is the same as Monday.
Okay.
Thursday is the same as Sunday. Now, maybe not Sunday because a lot of things are closed on Sunday. So there's certain things you can't do. You have to be creative. Shops aren't going to stay open until 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night. You have to do certain things within a certain time frame. You know, because people want to go to sleep and they want to get up the next day and do their own thing. And so their pace is automatically slowed down. And when you're slowing down and your pace is instantly slowed and you have fewer things to do, I think they're more intentional with how they pursue their time and how they pursue relationships in that to spend their time with down the road. Does that make sense? So for example, Simon and Tom, they're my photographers. They're young guys. You know, Simon rides his motorcycles all through Paris. Tom does street photography. To them, they would much rather come to my apartment, cook, have wine, a couple of cocktails, and just talk about life. Just talk about life. And they'll bring their girlfriends or they'll bring other friends. And it's really more about community. It's not about, hey, I want to sleep with this person, this person, this person, this person. I'm going to go to this club, and this club, and this club. I've got to have this. I've got to have this designer thing, because you got to realize, like in Paris, that's where all the designers are anyways. That is normal for them. And it's 1,000 times cheaper than what it is here in the States.
Right.
And so they're not impressed by that. So what I think I'm getting to in a roundabout way is Americans are impressed by the chase and the end result of what they think that chase will be. Europeans are not impressed by the chase because they've been around those things their entire life. They were raised in that. Does that make sense? So you'll see Parisians fascinated with a team like the New York Yankees because that's a big part of history. It's not because they're a baseball team. They're not looking at baseball players. They're just like, the Yankees are an iconic team. We want to understand the history. They're not sitting there counting batting averages and at-bats and strikes and World Series. They could give two craps about that. They're just more involved about the history.
Yeah.
So they're intentional with their community. They're intentional with their actions. They're intentional in their pursuit of intellectual and communal living in a way that is still very private at the same time. Most of my Parisian friends, they don't really post anything on Instagram. My American friends do, but my European friends are kind of like, I got to my phone today. I'll post a picture. They don't have
anybody to impress.
They have nobody to impress.
It's interesting because there's like this dichotomy of you're talking about intention, and they live with more intention.
For sure.
But at the same time, it's this slow pace where you're just kind of like, whatever happens today is kind of what happens.
But it's beautiful, right? Because the patience with intention creates amazing magic. I'm going to slow down and I'm going to enjoy the journey for what I'm intentional about. This is where I want to get. It's not going to be here. It's going to be like this. I may have to stop, take a few steps back, repaint, reshuffle, change my shoes, try this out on these months instead of this neighborhood, and then just work your way to that. But they're never about getting here. They really don't ever want to get here. Where I feel like Americans, like, I've got to have this job, I've got to go to this school, I've got to drive this car, I've got to have this bag, I've got to do this. There's not really an end goal. It's the journey.
Yeah.
And when you're intentional with the journey, I think the magic that happens along the way is really what they're living for.
Yeah.
That's my experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. It makes sense because I've actually mentioned this on other episodes, but it feels like within the American culture, specifically within dating, there is a huge lack of intention. It's just kind of what I described, not just for men, for women too, of this sort of like aimless living. So you're going to work, Friday comes, you text your friends, where is everybody? What are y'all doing? Especially if you live inside the loop in Houston. I mean, it's just everyone's at the same bars doing the same thing. And you just repeat that. And when it comes to dating, there's no intention of like, even the step one of like, where do I go to find the type of person I'm looking for? Even that is overlooked. So the rest falls apart. They're just doing things like there's no plan with anything rich. There's no richness to people's plans. It's just, where are we going to get drunk this weekend? And when you do that, then dating is way on the back burner. It's like, well, if I happen to meet someone that I find interesting at this bar and I'm not too drunk to talk to her, then maybe something will happen.
Yeah, very different. That's more of a mindset and value, I think.
It is, and that's not everyone, but culturally it seems to be the majority. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a vicious cycle to be in. It's a vicious cycle to be in.
How does that compare to what you see with dating and relationships in Europe or other countries?
Very one-on-one. I mean, you have a bar scene there, but it's not anything like you would see here.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, you're gonna have cafes, you're gonna have restaurants, and it's more of this one-on-one instead of this group herd mentality. It's more of an individual. I'm an individual. This is what I like. The people that I know, similar to this, will be at this same place. Does that make sense? It's not just so much herd mentality in the U.S. Go to the sports bar, go to this bar, go to this concert, go to this show, go to this. Like, it's just all these massive gatherings where you're talking about where you're getting drunk and things like that. I mean, the Parisians that I know, and again, I'm just speaking from my experience with my friends there. Like, they don't like the feeling of being drunk. They smoke cigarettes like I've never seen. That is amazing to watch. It's amazing to watch, but they're not going to go buy cartons. They're going to roll their own. You know, so
well,
even the little
there's
things.
There's actually a lot of health benefits to tobacco.
Yeah,
in
there's
moderation. But
yeah,
there's
there's these little things they do. Like it's even the little things. Like they don't want to buy a pack. They want to roll their own. They want to pick the type of tobacco. They want to pick all that stuff. But they want to go sit and smoke and have a conversation. You know, and when that is your culture and history, because like if my Parisian friend was sitting right here just talking to you in French, what would you do? How would you react?
Talking to me in French?
Yeah. Nice guy talking to you in English, talking to you in French. Like, what is your first perspective of this guy?
I don't know. I probably feel like he's really charming.
Yeah. But he's just being himself. And so there is this magic of being Parisian or being European. You know, I think it really only applies to certain European countries. Italy is another one. I think France, Scandinavian countries are very charming. But it's...
Does that include Greece?
I'm not really a big Greece fan.
Have you been there?
I've never been.
Oh. You're not a fan of all these places you've never been.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
That's just 2 places.
Okay. It is very bougie, if you do it right.
But what makes it bougie?
The experiences. I mean, when I went, because if I'm going to go overseas, then we're going to be bougie. We're not going to skimp. So...
But that's an American mindset. Right, so one of my best friends is Greek. She's from Athens.
That's definitely like a tourist mindset.
That's that Western culture, American. I'm gonna go all out, all inclusive. Sit at the beach. We're gonna go to Mykonos and take the same picture at the same spot that everyone's taking a picture at.
Well,
but
I wouldn't say that.
You go with my
friend.
friend.
To get in the culture and get in with the locals and stuff like that. But I mean, as far as like what I was doing, definitely like the fine dining, and you know, we're not staying at hostels type of thing.
Yeah, I've never stayed in a hostel.
Me neither.
But you know, fine dining again, that's subjective, right?
That's true.
You know, so fine dining there's a lot of folks that would call Perry's fine dining here in Houston.
No.
I know, but Perry's is really great. To a lot of people, Perry's is fine dining. Perry's is a nice restaurant. It's a beautiful restaurant. I love the pork chop bites. Their wine list is actually pretty decent. You know, they put tablecloths on the table, and I think dim lighting, and I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
I love Perry's, but I've also sat with David Toutain, Pierre Gagnier, Bruno Berjou, you know, who are top 30 chefs, Yannick Aleno, top 30 chefs in the world, and have been consistently for decades. And that's just a very different type of fine dining. But you're not going to find them on TripAdvisor.
Yeah.
You have to look. You have to be intentional. You have to understand gastronomy. You have to understand the food culture. But there has to be something that stimulates that for you to want to dig into that. And so what you see, I think, with European men is there is always that stimulation to dive deeper into something meaningful. So that could be a relationship, that could be a friendship, that could be a business, that could be a gastronomy, that could be a wine list, all those types of things. So they're living with intention most of the time, you know, and I feel like Americans talk about intention, American men talk about intention, but that's more of a buzzword than a lifestyle.
Yeah. So what would you say to American men who, like, how do you think, now that you've seen both sides or lived both sides, what's the fix? What, you know, because number one, realistically speaking, not everyone has the means to travel to Europe and live there for half the year. So they may not be able to gain that experience, even if they want to.
Sure.
And this is where we are. So, you know, not everyone in America is going to, not every woman's going to turn into a Parisian woman, where we are who we are. But there is always room for growth. So how do we shift and change this, what I would call shallow dating culture with little to no intention, to gain more richness? And if not actually doing that by going there and learning from those people, how do we cultivate? See what I did?
I see what you did there. It's a great question. So it's a fully loaded question that there's not enough time to talk about here.
Sure.
But I think with any change, you have to start small. If it were me and I was doing it over again, one of the things I did, because I was in Dallas for a hot minute, kill me now.
You don't like Dallas?
I don't hate Dallas, but it's just not my thing.
I hate it. I hate the people.
Yeah. Interesting group of people.
Yeah.
I've got great friends, and one of my
actually,
favorite
they're not
mentors.
interesting at all. They're all the same. They look the same, act the same, talk the same.
That's how I feel
It's
about.
all
That's how I feel.
Keeping up with the Joneses.
That's how I feel about Americans, and it's talking as one. And I know that sounds like it comes across as being better than you. I think I've had really great experiences that have given me a different perspective. Mm-hmm. I would start small. For me, I love French culture. I love Italian culture. So what I try to do, just even today, to try and grow and develop my own culture in that is, what can I do that's small here in my city that can prepare me for maybe a trip down the road, a year, 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, so I can see that culture. Best thing I ever did was sign up for a French class in Austin. And it was like French beginners, French intermediate, and French advanced. They talked about politics, they talked about history, they talked about food. And so it didn't matter what your language level was, it was more of an immersion class. And so they would do cooking, they would watch films, they would bring in different wine tastings and things like that. Mm-hmm. And you know, my French was decent enough that I could go at an intermediate level, which was great. But you sit there for an hour, 2 hours a week. I paid $30 a month. And I got to immerse myself in the culture, and I began to listen, and I began to listen, and I began to listen, and listen, and listen, and listen. You're getting my point here. Mm-hmm. To people who have experienced things that I want to experience. And so I think starting small like that, if you want to be intentional, then you have to be intentional. If you want to go to France and not stand in line at the Eiffel Tower behind the plexiglass, if you want to go to the Champs-Élysées and get ripped off at the PSG store and spend $800 for a jersey when you can go right across the river and buy it for $20, then you have to understand the culture. But you have to be intentional in that pursuit, a knowledgeable pursuit of it. Find a French class. You're going to find people from North Africa. You're going to find people from south of France, north of France, Canada, things like that, and then baby step it up. Mm-hmm. You know, for me, Montreal's a great city to go to. I can practice my French. Their accent's crazy hard because it's just it's not very French. It's a weird French, but it teaches you how others communicate in that same language. But it's, instead of paying $1,500 for a flight, you're paying $350 for a flight. Sure. That makes sense. You're going to get the food, you're going to get the culture, and so it's really just about being intentional in your exploration. But you have to want to do that.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I've learned a long time ago, and I think being in Alzheimer's care has taught me a lot, there's a difference, I think, in seeking knowledge and seeking wisdom. Does that make sense? Knowledge is going to be facts. Paris is the capital of France. You know, London is in England. You know, if I want to be intentional, then I have to be intentional. And so working with Alzheimer's residents, I would just listen. My only job was to listen. Thousands of years of combined living over the course of 15 years. What would you do? What would you do? So if you don't want to be in that little bubble of doing the same thing over and over again, find somebody 20, 30, 40 years older and say, what would you do? Mm-hmm. How would you do it? All you have to do is listen.
Yeah.
Money, relationships, friends, travel, food, music. They'll tell you.
Yeah.
And it's powerful.
Yeah. It sounds like kind of the general takeaway from that is to like do other things. Like do things that you're not familiar with. Take classes, go to shows or concerts, or engage museums, engage in things that the crowd, the herd is not doing. And number one, that's for primarily for your personal growth, to become a deeper, more wise, rich person. Secondary, you may meet someone there.
You might.
Someone that's actually...
I think having no expectations in that is also great.
Sure.
So let me ask you this question. If money didn't matter, if you could do anything in the world, what would you do every day?
What would I do every day?
What could you do every day?
Like just an average day.
Yeah.
Not the last day of my life.
Yeah, just an average day, like you wake up tomorrow. Money didn't matter.
Yeah.
Any of that kind of stuff, what would you do?
Realistically, it wouldn't be too different than what I do now. I mean, I would wake up and have a cup of coffee. I would make breakfast.
Would you want it to be in Houston, Texas?
Well, half yes and half no, because my family's here, so I'm not like trying to abandon them or leave them, and friends. But if I could snap my fingers and wake up in a different place every day, that would be ideal. If I could just teleport myself.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what stops you?
Well, there's not a teleportation device in my house.
It's true. It's true.
But, I mean, me personally, money. And for me personally, there's not really much that stops me. For most people, I don't think that they even really think about that.
No.
They don't think that far about their day or what they want their life to look like. Again, lack of intention. They don't think about what do I want to have experienced 5 years from now and how can I make that happen.
Yeah. I agree. Like I said, I've been very fortunate having 95-year-olds and 100-year-olds give you advice on a daily basis, whether you wanted it or not. Was coming to you.
What's the most common answer that you got when you asked what would you do or what's most important?
You know, I used to ask this question to all of my residents. You know, if you could go back and do it over, what would you do? Almost every single person said eat hot dogs.
What? No, they didn't.
Well, they're Depression era, so like hot dogs were a rarity. They were a treat.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't eat hot dogs.
Travel was always top of the list. I wish I would have seen Rome. I wish I would have seen the Colosseum. I wish I would have seen the Eiffel Tower. I wish I would have done this. It was never, I wish I had that bag. I wish I drove this car. I wish I had this job. I wish I had that house.
Yeah.
It was, I wish I could see my son more because I miss him. I wish I could take my wife here. I wish I would have loved harder. Material stuff, man, it goes.
Yeah.
It goes so fast. That's why the whole money conversation to me makes zero sense. I knew guys that were billionaires in 2007, and when Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns crashed, everything they worked for 50 years was gone instantly. They're 7 years old applying for jobs at a grocery store.
What do you mean by the money conversation?
Just, I think it's an American culture thing. We've kind of had that conversation, you know, privately about, you know, I've got to have this. It's a check in the box. I've got to have this money, a stable partner, financial assets here. I got to have a provider, all that kind of stuff, which is important, especially in a marriage. But at the end of the day, your experiences are going to give you wisdom. Not your money.
I want your feedback on something that's on the show. So Kelsey essentially made a comment about she has an expectation that the man that she marries makes as much or more money than her. Number one, because she wants to maintain her lifestyle that she has built for herself. And number two, because she wants to, when she has kids, scale back on her work to raise the kids. So in other words, stay home. And has an expectation that her husband will be able to provide when that happens. That's a conversation that's been on the show. What do you think about that? And how does that compare to maybe that scenario in the French culture?
I think it's a naive conversation.
Okay.
I think it's a naive conversation. Because how do you know what's going to happen tomorrow? I mean, you're in an election year this year. I mean, I would love to hear somebody tell me about the creation of the Federal Reserve and how your money supply is even, you know, monetized and dictated and controlled. I'd love to show me a 20, 30, 40-year model, what that's look like, you know. But there's a lot of guys. 2008, it's a great example. 2021 is another great example. You know.
Lost everything.
You lose it all tomorrow.
What do you think the expectations should be for women when it comes to money or just like the provision of the man?
I think if it's important to you, have a conversation. But that's on you. That has to buy into your mindset and your values and beliefs and your principles. If that's important to you, ask the question. That doesn't bother me. Ask the question. I may not answer it because that may not, you know, vibe with my mindset or my values or my principles. And that's okay. It's good to know it early.
So you think it doesn't matter who makes what or more?
Money makes life easier. I've made a lot of money. I've lost a lot of money. I've made a lot of money. I've lost a lot of money. But you know what? I'm still sitting here. I'm drinking really good wine, and I have a brother and a sister-in-law that freaking love me. Yes, you did.
It was
it's
not
a great
expensive.
choice.
It was $22.
Yeah, that's a great. Hey, this whole thing about expensive wine is for the birds.
That's what I think.
There
but
are
I didn't
great
know what
bottles
your judgment
for.
was going to be.
One of the best bottles I ever had was a Grand Cru Riesling for $18 out of Austin Wine Merchant, and I was like, "This is the best I've ever had." It was $18. Yeah, that's the whole bougie stuff is just, it's all marketing.
For wine, at least.
For wine, but I think if it's important to you, have the conversation. But that's only something that you can determine. You know, for me, it's, I started my company living in my car. You know, but I can also afford to live in Paris. But I worked my tail off.
Yeah.
But I was willing to give up a lot of things that people aren't willing to give up. And so that's a principal value mindset thing.
Do you see a difference in that mindset over there?
For sure.
Because I hear what you're saying. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just trying to get, the conversation out there. But Americans are very materialistic. Again, stereotypically, generally speaking.
Yes.
I
know you're painting with broad strokes.
That's what we're known for. I mean, again,
that's the perspective. That's the perception.
If you travel and if you ask other people, why do you hate Americans? That's always what it comes back to. I had a guy he was giving us a wine tour in Santorini, and I asked him why. I was riding the front seat with him, and I said, so why do Europeans hate Americans so much? And he was like, well, it's not that we hate them. It's just we think you're very shallow. And
fake.
He said, we just think of Kim Kardashian when we think of Americans. And
that's a true statement.
And he was like, fake and shallow and materialistic. And so that's just, your perception is your reality. Obviously, not all of us are Kim Kardashian, but that's the stereotype.
Yeah, I mean, my Parisian friends would say a lot of the same thing. It's fake. There's it's just an attitude that's not real. It's fake, and I think that's a turnoff to a lot of people because that's what's marketed. That's what you consume on Instagram. That's what you consume on media. Is this.
Yeah.
And we're kind of sidetracking here, but like, French women are typically taught like from a very early age. Whether it's your hair and skincare and how you age, there is an appreciation for aging. But that's taught at a very early age. Age gracefully. There is an elegance.
Rather than don't age.
Then don't age. It's age gracefully. Why would you avoid what's coming for you anyways?
And I would argue that used to be the mindset in America.
Maybe early on, like in the,
Like I would say old Hollywood was definitely more so aging gracefully. I mean, an older plastic surgeon that I know, she says back in the day, like when she first started, people wanted Botox and things to the point that nobody knew they had it, and they just wanted, a little extra jump start to aging gracefully. But everything was discreet, and you didn't want people to know you were doing it. It was just to help a little bit, like skincare. And now people want Botox and filler and plastic surgery to look different. They don't want to just look better, a better version of themselves. They want to look different. They want to look like Kim Kardashian. I
think Kim Kardashian's gross, but that's just my perspective.
Yeah.
But like, again, this goes back to culture, right? And I say this all the time. How old is the United States? How long have we been a country? 250 years, 1776,
Yeah.
How long has France been a country?
I don't know.
They've been around forever.
Thousands of
years. And so they're being taught by generations that have been through things that we as Americans have never experienced. When's the last time a foreign country occupied Houston, Texas? And took it over? Hung their flags from another country in this state?
Never.
When's the last time someone showed up at your door and took your family and stuck you in a camp somewhere? When's the last time you saw bombers flying over your house? When's the last time another country invaded you and kidnapped you and took all your women and children and made all your men slaves? So they've gone through that for centuries and generations and generations and generations. So they understand more of the world and how the world works. Americans, we're literally the babies of the world, and we cry like little babies.
What do you mean by that?
We cry, we complain, we trigger easily. If we don't have it right now, I gotta have my bottle right now. and we complain.
As opposed to
enjoying the journey. I need it right now. I want my food right now. One of my French friends, this is an interesting comment he made to me. He goes, because he just came back from doing a shoot in New York. He said, I was watching TV in my hotel room, and he goes, every commercial is a pharmaceutical or a fast food commercial. He goes, why is that?
That's another episode.
He goes, why? He goes, why is that? He goes, it's literally every commercial is, here's the next sports team coming up, here's the next pharmaceutical med you should take, and here's the fast food you should eat tonight. He goes, I don't understand that. He goes, I don't ever see that in Europe.
Yeah.
I got to have it now. I got to feel good now. I got to look good now. I got to eat now. I have to drink now. I have to party now. I have to travel now. I have to make money now. I have to do it now.
And that's something
you lose life.
That's something that I've actually mentioned as well on the show, is especially for our generation with the internet and dating apps and social media, there is this desire for instant gratification when it comes to dating or romantic interaction. And it diminishes the value of relationships, especially from a man's standpoint.
For sure.
They're trying to biologically get their needs met. And so when you can do that really quickly by swiping right a few times on a dating app and meeting up with somebody, or it's easier to do that by making a shallow connection at a bar with somebody that you're attracted to and going home with them, as opposed to building a relationship with somebody and getting to the point of having physical intimacy. It devalues that waiting. And everything's instant gratification in general, but it has infiltrated and bled into dating. And so people, I would argue, majority women who still want the long term, we still want relationships, we want marriage. It's harder to find men who actually not only want that, but are willing to wait and put in the work and have the patience for that, when in the back of their mind somewhere, or when they're out drunk, it's, it would be so much easier just to meet up with this girl that I saw on an app. Especially when you have girls out there that are just giving it away. How does that differ from culture in Europe?
I think it's just environmental.
What does that mean?
That's the environment we've created in the States. That's not the environment created there. You want to change your environment, change your boundaries, change your values, change your mindset. That's a very different mindset, very different set of values and perspective over there.
So, devil's advocate, there will probably be some people watching who think like, oh, well, they're going to say, just go back to France then, why are you here? Talking down on America. I hear what you're saying, because at the end of the day, we are not going to become France. We're not going to all pack up and move to France, right?
It's not about France, it's about perception and culture and boundaries and values. And if somebody has an issue with that, then that's their issue. It has nothing to do with me.
I think the question is, now that you've been on both sides of it, what should we do about it?
I think you should explore, start small and then grow. That's
travel.
Not even travel. It's Houston has great culture in it. There's so many different places you can go. The food scene, I think the food in Houston is probably some of the best in Texas, the food scene here.
Yeah, for sure.
And so you have opportunities.
I would argue the whole country.
Yeah, you have opportunities to go explore. Go explore it. If you have to do it by yourself, do it by yourself. Change your environment.
Yeah.
Some of the best conversations that have led to me exploring and educating myself have happened, not on dates, but have happened 8 o'clock at night after 12 hours of work, sitting in a bar, having a conversation with a bartender who is from another country and saying, tell me about your country.
Yeah, being curious.
Being curious.
Yeah. Being curious
and exploring. Yeah, but that you have to do that. If someone thinks I'm talking down to Americans, who the heck cares? I have a great life. I do some really cool stuff, and I've done a lot of things that a lot of folks will never do, but I've taken the risk to do that. When I first traveled to Europe the first time, I paid $300 for a round trip flight. I sat in the very back of the plane. I think I sat in the restroom. That's how far back my seat was. I found some friends who knew some friends, and I stayed on their couch for a week. Didn't get a hotel, didn't have any money. They were immigrants from Venezuela. living in Ireland. And so I stayed on their couch in this super sketch part of Dublin, and I had the most fun I've ever had in my life.
That's
and
awesome.
I spent $400 over the course of 10 days. That's it.
Wow.
That's all I had. But that will change your life.
Yeah, and people will, the people who go out to bars every weekend will spend that in one night.
Yeah, and I mean, Rennie and Santiago, I still talk to them on a regular basis. I love them. Rennie's married. He's got 2 kids now. One of them's racing BMX. Santiago actually moved from Ireland back into the States in Pittsburgh. But we talk about Ireland all the time. Talk about Dublin. And Rennie was a DJ for a salsa band in Dublin right off Temple Bar. And we'd go take salsa lessons and bachata, merengue, and all this kind of stuff with him. I wasn't good at it, but I would learn. I would get out there and make a fool of myself to learn, you know. And I met some really cool people from Romania, from the Czech Republic, some Russians, Ukrainians, and we've literally been friends ever since. And so whenever I go, I'm not paying all this money for a giant hotel. I stay with my friends. They're my family. They're my family.
Yeah.
And for me, that was changing my environment. That cost me total $700 over 10 days.
So it's not that you're talking down on Americans, you've broadened your perspective, I guess it sounds like, and you can kind of just say, this is that and this is that.
Yeah.
This is my preference.
Yeah. I think if Americans think I'm talking bad about Americans, and I think they should travel to where I've traveled to and met the friends that I've met and been in the environments that I've been in. I think it would change your perspective. My family's American, my brother's American. I mean, I harass him all the time for not traveling more, but he's my brother, you know, and that's kind of how we are.
Yeah.
And I've got friends who are like, yeah, my friend Chelsea, she went to Portugal. She was like, I didn't want to go. She's like, you always say bad things about Americans. And she's like, and she's one of my best friends, and she's like, I didn't believe you. And she goes, I went to Portugal for 4 days. It was life-changing. And she goes, I'm taking my whole family's going back to Switzerland this year. We're trying a new country. And I said, yes. Yeah. So you're taking a narrative that you've been sold and applying that to me without understanding my journey.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's part of where my motivation for the topic comes. I had this topic way before we started talking.
Yeah.
It was just finding somebody or multiple people potentially that would be able to speak on it.
Sure.
And I thought it would at least ease into it with someone who is an American instead of having some foreign guy come on here and tell us how terrible.
Oh, my European friends would love it. and it's, again, I understand how it comes across. I think what frustrates me is I have seen the end of life with people. And I've spent the last 15 years taking care of people at the end of their life going, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done this.
Sad.
That makes me sad. It's very empathetic. And so I don't want that to happen to my family or to my friends. Get out and see the world. If you don't want to, you don't want to.
Yeah.
But you can't, I think it's naive and foolish to say things about things you've never experienced.
Sure.
Parisians are rude. French are rude. Have you ever met them? Have you tried the language? Have you understood their culture? No? Shut the hell up.
Yeah.
Your words are meaningless.
Same thing about Greece.
Touche.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have seen that. Again, that's one of my motivations for this topic. That was on my original list when I thought, what the heck are we going to talk about on this show? Because I have had some of those perspective changes when I have traveled. I started traveling at like 15. And then in dating as well, not only dating men from other areas of the world, but just spending time with them, whether that be in my travels or people who live here. And you see a completely different mindset from guys from a different country and the way that they see us, the way that they see women most of the time, not all. And that's another question I wanted to ask you is, like, in American culture, we feel that there's a huge, rift. There's this huge divide between a lot of groups of people, but specifically men and women. It's, men suck, they're trash, they lie, they're not loyal, we don't need them. And then they think we're just crazy and we're just out to get their money and we're not loyal, and everybody's just like this. And the more that happens, the further we get from the truth of what do you want, what do you actually want, and what do you actually want, and what's going to get you to being together. Where do you think this stems from, and how is that different from the connection between men and women in Europe?
I think that's just people. I think it's just the nature of humanity.
What do you mean?
I think men and women warring against each other, that's been around since the dawn of time. I think that's just the nature of humanity.
You don't think it's worse now than before?
Well, I mean, worse now compared to what? We talking ancient Rome?
No, maybe 40 years ago. Like when your parents got together.
You know, I wasn't there 40 years ago when they got together, but, you know, I think that people are people are people are people. And I think if it's not one thing, it'll be another thing. I mean, I think back in the day, they had like Battle of the Sexes, and, you know, there was a movie made about that with the tennis folks. I think that's just the nature of humanity.
I think that was like one of the first reality TV shows too, on MTV, Battle of the Sexes.
So there's always been this pitting of men and women against each other.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you see that in ancient times, you see that in modern times, you see that 100 years ago. I think
Where does
that's
that
just
come from?
Oh, I think that comes from the Garden of Eden. That's just the nature of sin.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of sin to want to conquer something and manipulate something and deceive in a way that makes you superior to another. It's humanity.
You think that we want to be superior to y'all and y'all want to be superior to us?
I don't think that. I think that is just how those arguments happen. That's how those narratives are created.
Mm-hmm. What's the cure to that?
Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah? Your dad was a pastor. I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah, for a long time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, he's had his own things. My mom's had her own things. I've had my own things. You know, John's had his own things. Sarah has her own things. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of sin, not being perfect.
Yeah.
You know, and I think when the expectation is to be perfect and you put that on somebody like, this is you, this is you, this is you, I think that's an easy way out. I just think it's an easy way out. Everybody has their stuff. You have to decide if you want to work through it or not. But again, that goes back to your principles, your mindset, and your values. And when you've cobbled all those together, it's easy to point fingers. You know? It's just easy to point fingers.
Yeah, be like Jesus.
Well, we'll never be like Jesus until we're there. But I think that...
Try to be.
Yeah, I think try is a passive-aggressive word.
A passive-aggressive?
I think try. I'm going to try. I'm going to try and do that. I'm going to try and do that.
Oh, okay. Aim to be like Jesus.
Yeah, I think seek's a great word.
Seek, okay.
You know,
like seek.
Seek is that you're searching, there's an exploration, you're navigating, you're looking at all the dangers and naps.
Depending on context, try can be like, oh, I'm going to try.
Yeah. And so I think that, you know, nobody's perfect. No one's ever going to be perfect. You know, it's, I heard Matt Stanley say one time, he said, where do you put your hope? Are you putting your hope in I'm a better guy than this guy? That's pretty risky. It's a pretty risky move. If there's anything as the afterlife, saying that I'm better than you because I take my dog out, I wash my dog, I take my kids, I'm at all their practices, I'm at all their games. You know, it's, I love what he said. He goes, the scary part of the Bible is not that you're judged on your wickedness. It's that your righteousness is considered filthy rags compared to the glory of Christ. It's your goodness that falls short, not just your wickedness. Yeah. And so I think when you understand that perspective and you understand your values, yes, are we prone to make mistakes? Are we prone to temptation? Are we prone to falling into that? For sure, that's going to happen. But to say, that's because you do this and you do this and you do this, I think that's a dangerous game to play, but I think that is the game that they want you to play. Yeah. And I think if you're wise enough and smart enough and diligent enough to move out of that, I think healthy conversations begin to start. And then guess what begins to happen? Toxicity begins to fall away. Who's pouring into you? Who are you pouring into? All that begins to change and adjust and shift. But I think you have to live through some things. Yeah. And I think you have to be raised in certain things like that at the same time. So you weren't number one draft pick? Cry me a river, man. Cry me a freaking river. You're probably not that good anyways. Yeah. You know, you can't fit in that dress. Do the work to fit in the dress. Yeah. That's not on me. That's on you. If you're going to shame me for doing that, I mean, that's an absolute asinine move to make. Because you have a choice. A choice to be intentional or not. A choice to understand culture. A choice to understand history. A choice to seek something greater than yourself. A choice to seek and set boundaries and principles and develop your values in a way. And that's what I told you. I think what you're doing is very brave and courageous, because there's a lot of people that won't do it.
Thank you.
But you're having the conversation.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hard thing to do.
It's really not. I mean, bravery, I would say, yes, but it's not hard. It's really pretty easy. Hardest part's editing the videos.
Yeah.
The conversations are not hard at all.
Yeah. Well, there will come a time when what you think worked won't, and you have to do the work to dig to find the problem.
Sure.
That's the hard part.
Yeah.
It's easy to dip our toe in the shallow end. It's a different thing to survive in the deep end.
What do you mean by that?
So, watching your podcast and the conversations you have, right? Again, this goes back to cultural, diversity with European countries and the States.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't really been through a whole lot.
Sure.
So we have to create things to fight about.
Yeah.
Right? We have to create them, market them, for mass consumption, so that we can say he said, she said, because someone's making money off of that. I got to buy something. Mm-hmm. You just don't see that really elsewhere, at least in Europe, or I haven't seen it. Mm-hmm. I'm sure it happens, but I haven't seen it. So if we're manufacturing all these things to create arguments for, can't you manufacture something that you don't have to have arguments for at the same time? But that requires boundaries and values and mindsets and principles. And to understand those values and mindsets and principles, you have to look inward to go, this is who I am, this is how I was created, these are my values. Then you have to stick to those. Because that means you're going to lose friendships, you're going to lose relationships, you're going to lose family, you're going to lose jobs. And that's hard. Swimming in that deep end is hard, because it's utterly lonely.
Yeah.
But out of that comes just phenomenal, amazing stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the arguments, you hit the nail on the head, that these arguments between men and women are completely manufactured. And that's why the show is so important to me, because if you actually sit down with a man or sit down with a married couple and actually discuss these things, the reality that exists within people is not the reality that's being manufactured outward at all.
Agree.
But if you're constantly consuming that and you're not consuming this, then that becomes your reality.
Sure, that's why I said the other day, I think we have confused consumption as knowledge. I'm consuming this in 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 60 seconds, 30 minutes, 25 minutes. I know. I know this is what you said. This is who you are. Because I watched this reel on Instagram for 15 seconds. And they took a splice of this podcast that was 3 hours long. Therefore, I'm an expert. I know this is who you are because I've seen it. Full of
Yeah. Yeah, people are complex.
Are they?
Everyone has a story. I mean, everyone has where they came from and why they are the way they are. And you're never gonna understand that from a 30-second reel. You're never going to understand who Kelsey is and why she may be saying the things she's saying, whether you disagree with them or agree with them or not, from hearing her say them in 30 seconds.
Sure.
But people will, like you said, assume who she is just based on those 30 seconds of words, which does create that tension.
Creates friction.
Yeah. It sounds like in Europe that none of that really goes on, because it's all about the human connection, sitting down and
definitely more intention on relationship building and human connection.
Yeah.
They're not perfect by any means. I mean, they're still humans. There's still friction, but I think how they navigate through that, there's just a greater history of how to navigate through that. So they have greater examples. Like I said, we're still very much a baby country.
Yeah.
We're babies. What do babies do?
Grow up.
So that's the goal. That's the goal.
That is the goal.
And when you grow up, what magically happens? You see things differently. Your perspective changes. Your values, your principles, all that stuff that I've been saying, and we've been talking about. Those convictions become real.
Yeah.
That's what it is. There are certain things in the French culture that I'm not going to do. That's just kind of how they roll. But I don't understand that part of the culture yet.
Yeah, there are some things I have questions of. So another stereotype about them is like they're not really monogamous, and they just kind of sleep around. The
ones I know are incredibly monogamous.
Okay.
It's a very romantic city, so I can see how people say that. But I mean, there may be, in my experience and my friends, it's very monogamous. It's very just one-on-one. You're not going to see a bunch of group dates. You're not going to see it. It's very one-on-one, very intentional. It is very intense romantic. crazy intense. But it's a very cool thing.
Intense in what way?
Intense, and there is an intense desire to know somebody. There's a great intimacy in that city. Okay. I think that city fosters it. And not an intimacy like sexual or physical, but it's like, I want to know what stimulates you, like emotionally, mentally, physically. It's this overall well-being of a person. It's beautiful.
Interesting.
It's beautiful.
It sounds like we all need to travel more.
Take a French class.
Take a French class. And what was the other thing you said? Be like Jesus. No, aim to be like seek. Okay. So my closing question for you is that I ask everybody is, what is your biggest regret or thing that you would do differently in your dating past?
I don't think I would do anything differently.
Not one thing.
I've been pretty fortunate. I've been pretty lucky. I've had a couple of missteps here and there, but it's just part of life. How I choose to recover from that. I think if I go back and change anything, I might change how I choose to reconcile or recover individually more than, together, and how I would do work differently. But
you mean how you choose to like heal from a relationship or something?
Yeah, how you choose to heal, or how you choose to communicate, or how you choose to recommunicate, or how you choose to, just sit in that emotion. Sometimes I'd eat a couple of bags of Cheetos, and that's just not good for you, and you feel sick the next day, and it's
gonna make you feel worse.
It's gonna make you feel worse.
Yeah.
Feel good in the moment, but it's just like,
okay,
that's my thing.
Cheetos.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate. I mean, I've made some awful decisions in my life, some bad ones, but I've also, really tried to learn intentionally in that and lean into it at the same time. I've tried to really surround myself with great people, great friends who are like, Matt, stop. There's enough respect for me to listen to them because I've sought their advice and counsel very early on. And most of them are older. Most of them are 20, 30 years older than me, But I've been very intentional in that, which has saved me a lot of heartache.
Yeah.
Probably more than most. And it's been really good. And I'll close with this. I think my biggest thing with Europeans and Americans is Europeans know there's limited amounts of time to live. They know they're here for a season. That could be 30 years, that could be 21 years, that could be 60 years, that could be 90 years. Because they've seen it, that's how they were raised. You're here for a brief moment. Live your life. I think Americans think we're gonna live forever. I'm telling you, once you hit 50 in this country, nobody cares. You know how many of my residents I took care of that their families never came to see them? Probably 40%. These are men that have been providers. These are women that have been mothers, sisters, brothers, wives, husbands. We push you to the side.
Yeah.
You hit a certain age, and maybe that's why some of the warmongering and fear-mongering happens with men and women in the States, is because you're trying to get it all right now. Because we're in that culture, you're gonna sit there and you're gonna see this amazingly dressed woman that's 80 years old walking with a cane, and everybody wants to talk to her. That's rare in the States. Her life, she's still living her life.
Yeah.
And there's an appreciation for her life.
Well, thank you, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Natalie.
You did a great job.
Very
valuable perspective.
Good wine always helps the conversation.
Yay! I felt pressure to get that, so I'm glad I did good. I debated just getting something from Napa and just playing joke on you. Got you the cheapest, worst thing I could pick out.
That was awesome.
What he said.
Huh?
That's what he said.
Oh, absolutely.
So
that is hot.
Is it? I'm not hot. Maybe you're nervous.
I don't get nervous anymore. I used to.
I do get hot.
When I was in 3rd grade.
Thank y'all so much for tuning in to today's episode of That's What He Said. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I hope you're taking away something valuable that will benefit your dating life. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please give this show a follow, rate, and review. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe, like this video, and most importantly, comment below because I want to hear what you said. See you next time. Thank you.